thank you all for coming, and I'd love to hear your comments. I hope you see the parallelism in what's happening to our immigrants today and what happened to our immigrants yesterday, and how they're often the most hardworking people of all who have built this country. And all of us, most of us from an immigrant background, so that I hope the film creates some parallel and empathy for what's happening to immigrants today, and also, of course, some realization of the feminist movement, which has had a long history. It took over 100 years of working with mother passing to daughter, passing to granddaughter, to achieve the vote for women, which only happened in my mother's lifetime, 1917. That women have had the vote. And then, of course, here we are in the struggle for climate justice, which affects all of us. So I'd love to hear any questions or commentary that you have. As long as we're divided and conquer, we'll never save the earth in time for the young. I'm 76, so it won't matter to me so much, but I'm very concerned for the young people and the children of the planet and those to come and all of civilization. And of course, a way to keep us from saving the earth is to keep us distracted by all the social justice and injustices going on, the problems of immigrants, of racism, which is reborn in our time with the recent election. So anything you want to say, ask, comment?
You used an expression, the importing of people, something like that, if you remember. Yeah. I never thought of it that way. I mostly thought of it as the desperate act of people to get away from the conditions they were facing in Europe. For instance, I mean, I guess it would be third generation Irish, so I'd always, heard about, I didn't hear about it within my own family. I learned later about the famine. Right. So do you see it as perhaps a combination of factors, leaving desperate conditions behind, but finding desperate conditions here too?
Of course, it was a combination, and of course they were told by the steamship captains that it would be a wonderful life, streets paved with gold, and then they ended up in poverty here as well. But as I said, there was public education, and I do believe that education is the key to everything, to erasing prejudice. We found that the millennials in the last election don't have prejudice so much as generations that came earlier, because they have had, the educated millennials, those under 40, have less racist, less sexist, less tendencies towards all those prejudices, which is hopeful. So you young people are the future, and you can get rid of all these crazy prejudices while you work on saving the planet. I didn't make the film. It's a film made by a professional filmmaker, Anton Evangelista. He heard me speaking at Seton Hall, and he read this story of my life in a book, and something about me in a book called Pioneering Italian America. He decided to make the film. He's a very talented filmmaker, so it was all his idea and his production and his direction. Of course, I helped finding pictures and photographs and helping with the narration, but Anton Evangelista really, of Comprehensive Films Incorporated, really deserves credit. He's made many films on many subjects dealing with immigrants, he's had a feature film that won many festival awards. He went to the High School of Design and Art and Design, and he even worked with Martin Scorsese at one point. So he really deserves the credit for the film, but thank you so much.
Well, first I just wanted to say you're truly a remarkable human being. Thank you for everything you've done. I wanted to ask, you said in the film you had to swallow your anger, with the abuse from the KKK and remembering what your father had to go through. How did you do it? It's a very hard thing to do, how did you swallow your anger?
Well, through activism. Instead of giving up, I became a warrior, and I'm only one small person. There are millions of people like me, and right now Honduras is suffering horribly. All their environmental activists are being murdered because of a coup of their government, which the U.S. supported. So we have people all over the world working on this. You can join them. There are millions. We had 500,000 marching in New York, and there were contingency marches all over the country and the world that day in 2014, September, when we marched past the UN when the climate summit was happening. So just think of me as just one of many people braver than I am who are out there working on this, and you can join them. And you know what's good? Even psychologists, and I think Dr. Guillen would tell us, that when you do something good for others, you produce endorphins in your brain that make you feel better and happier. So we as humans are really programmed to do good for each other. That's a psychological fact that Dr. Guillen can explain better than I have, but neurological psychologists have discovered this phenomenon. So if you join other young people in the movement, and if you work for others, you're going to feel better, and that's how I felt better, by doing for others and producing those endorphins that made me feel better after my own ordeal. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Grassroots is so important. Run for office, run for the school board, run for the city council. There are lots of good, this is what Bernie Sanders is recommending that people who care do. And the thing about Bernie Sanders, he doesn't even allow the lobbyists into his office. He lives modestly. He's never let those lobbyists influence him. And that's why so many young people were for him, because he had the biggest rallies in the history of presidential campaigning. But he recommends that young people run for office, take over the local governments. But you're right about the real estate developers destroying our city with multi-million-dollar condos, and because they make big campaign contributions to our politicians. And our local library was taken over by a huge skyscraper and diminished. The other scary thing is the science books and the ecology books are disappearing from our libraries. So there's going to be a forum next April 8th at the Unitarian Universalist Church right here in Brooklyn Heights on Monroe and Pierpont. We're going to have a forum on the privatization of public lands, because our public lands are being sold under value to very wealthy real estate developers, particularly a Mr. Schwartz, who is a great friend of Donald Trump. So it comes right down locally here. This presidential administration is affecting our own neighborhood with this Schwartz guy who's been the first one who sold off the Daniella library under value. So those are our public libraries. We own them, and they're being sold under value to fancy real estate developers, just like the ones blocking the view of our most iconic piece of architecture, the Brooklyn Bridge, with multi-million-dollar condos. The Brooklyn Bridge Park is semi-corporate. It's semi-private. Mayor de Blasio sits on the board. He could have stopped those condos along Brooklyn Bridge Park with a stroke of his pen. He has complete control over the executive board. We sent him 70,000 signatures of people who didn't want to obstruct the view of our most iconic architecture from the promenade, the public park that belongs to the people. We didn't get one answer. So, good and bad. He does some good things, but certainly we have to pressure him about this issue. So come on April 8th. I think it begins at 2 or 3 o'clock, and you can find it, listed. And there'll be a big forum on this very issue, the privatization of our public lands and the ruination of our public libraries, the foundation of our children's learning. Yes, I know. The immigrant situation is terrible right now. It echoes back to a time when these Italian immigrants and Japanese immigrants, innocent immigrants, were thrown into concentration camps right here in America. And the same kind of bad treatment is happening now to Muslims, a wall is not going to solve anything. That wall is going to cost millions of dollars, billions of dollars of our taxes. And it's also going to keep wildlife from going back and forth to find food and water. And it's going to be a disaster that your taxes are going to pay for if you don't protest. Well, there are always calls to be made, which you can make from your cell phones and your smartphones. emails that you can write. I hope you're all aware that every elected official has a website and an address and an email address or a form that you can fill out. Right now, here in New York, we're lucky to be in a sanctuary state. And even if you don't think of Governor Cuomo as perfect, which I don't, he has done some good things like ban fracking for natural gas. We have to get off fossil fuels very quickly. So in New York State, we have a movement to have completely clean, renewable energy by 2030 or earlier. So you can call Governor Cuomo every week and say, we want clean energy. Right now, we're fighting gas lines, liquid gas lines that are being built. There's one called the Algonquin pipeline being built right near the dangerous Indian Point for liquid gas, only 100 feet from Indian Point. Call Governor Cuomo and say, do not permit the Algonquin pipeline. I have some flyers with his telephone number, but you can find it easily on the internet. So even if you're not up to marching, there's going to be a huge march on April 29th. Gather your friends and get together and go to the march. I'm sure there'll be marches as there were. The Women's March we recently had since the making of this film was the largest global march in history. It happened in every big city of the world. We had over 1 million people in Washington, 500,000 here. I'm sure there'll be contingency marches in New York that you can watch for. You can belong to many environmental groups where you'll meet other lovely young people who are working on these issues. 350 Bill McKibben's organization has a New York chapter, 350nyc.org. Look at the back of the program. There are websites that you can go to. There are things you can do. We're also fighting now to stop the Plymouth pipeline. So there are things you can do right here from your cell phone, from your social media, from your email. You can write to your representatives and demand clean energy. Also, anyone who gets a bill from Con Edison can have completely clean energy in their home. Go to cleanenergy.com or cleanenergy.org, and you can have your own ESCO supplying completely wind energy to your apartment. And it's very nominal. I did it years ago. I only pay less than 10 cents per kilowatt hour. I have completely clean wind energy in my apartment. I still get my bill through Con Edison, but my company that's supplying the energy to the grid is completely wind energy. And I like cleanenergy.com the best because it only reinvests in renewable energy. But look at the back of the program. Are there some still out there? There are many websites you can go to, 350.org, the Climate Reality Project run by Al Gore. I have all of this on my website, eco-poetry.org. I have news and alerts linking you to all the organizations and what's going on. Because I'm very sad to tell you that right now we have gone beyond a tipping point. We are now in what the climatologists call uncharted territory. And I think you all know what causes global warming. Is there anyone here who doesn't know that we're creating a dome of pollution in our thin veil of atmosphere so that the sun cannot reflect into outer space the way it used to when we had a healthier planet home? And so it deflects back to the oceans, overheating them, acidifying them, killing the barrier reefs. I'm sure you know that it takes 200 years for carbon to dissipate. And who put the most up there? The United States of America. We are 4% of the global population, and we have done the most damage in the past. We put the most carbon up there. Of course, China and India are now at fault, and other countries, but Europe is way ahead of us on this. Germany will be fossil-free very shortly. There is a way. We have more solar energy now in the United States. My daughter has solar energy panels on her roof just 20 minutes west of the city in Maplewood. So things are, and you can go to ecowatch.com and learn all the latest. And I want to just end by telling you right here at 16 Court Street in Brooklyn Heights, in Brooklyn, we have a Pulitzer Prize winning newsletter, InsideClimateNews.com. at 16 Court Street, InsideClimateNews.com. Won a Pulitzer Prize. It reports globally the good and the bad news about climate. So you can watch that, and they give you things you can do. Right now, they're the ones who did the investigative reporting that is attempting to sue Exxon. We have 17 attorney generals of 17 states attempting to sue ExxonMobil for lying for over 25 years. They knew that fossil fuel was causing climate crisis, and they did nothing about it because of the profit motive for greed. And you all know that the current administration is destroying the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So we have to work on the state level, and there's a lot you can do to make New York State an example for the rest of the country. So there's lots you can do locally with your telephones, with your social media, with marching, with calling, with writing. Even if you just spend 5 minutes every day calling or writing a letter, we should all be doing that, because we have a motto in the movement to save the earth: to save everything, we need everyone now. So thank you so much for being here. And even though there's only a few of us, you can all speak to others, and telegraph, tell a woman. You can really spread the word around, and we have some lovely gentlemen here too. If you just reach 5 other people and get them calling and writing, it goes exponentially if they reach another 5. So let's not give up hope, keep hope alive, and thank you so much.